Hi, my name is Rachel, and today we're going to be talking about the tale of Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. It's a novel written in 1865 by Charles Dodson under the pseudonym of Lewis Carroll. The story of Alice is about a young girl who falls down a rabbit hole into a world of fantasy. Since 1865, the book has never been out of print. In fact, it has been recreated several times and translated in 125 different languages. Chapter 1, Down the Rabbit Hole. As Alice is sitting by the riverbank reading a book, she sees a rabbit wearing a coat and carrying a watch, saying, "I'm late, I'm late." Alice then follows the rabbit down a hole and begins to fall very slowly through a bunch of wonderful objects. When she finally reaches the bottom, she finds herself trapped in a room with a tiny table with a tiny gold key placed on it. Behind a curtain, she finds a door that is too small for her to fit through. She looks back over at the table and realizes a bottle that wasn't there before. It's labeled "Drink Me." She takes a sip and shrinks down small enough to fit through the door, but then she realizes she's no longer tall enough to reach the key on top of the table. Then she finds a cake under the table labeled "Eat Me." Through shrinking and growing, she finally makes it through the door. Chapter 2, The Pool of Tears. Alice is unhappy and begins to cry. Her tears flood the hallway. As she's swimming through her tears, she meets a mouse, but all she can seem to talk about is her cat, which offends the mouse, so he swims away. In Chapter 3, Alice is swept through a sea of tears with a bunch of other animals that end up washed up on shore and discuss how to dry off. They end up deciding to have a foot race where everyone runs in a circle with no clear winner. The White Rabbit reappears in Chapter 4 and is looking for the Duchess's fan and gloves. He orders Alice to go inside and look for them. When Alice gets inside the house, she grows very tall. Horrified onlookers begin to throw pebbles at her, which turn into tiny cakes. She then eats and grows down to her normal size. In Chapter 5, Alice comes across a huge mushroom with a caterpillar sitting on top smoking a hookah. Alice admits to the caterpillar that she doesn't really know who she is anymore. Before he leaves, he tells her that one side of the mushroom will make her grow taller and one side will make her grow shorter. She takes a bite out of one side of the mushroom and she grows smaller than ever. When she takes a bite of the other side of the mushroom, her neck grows high into the trees and the birds mistake her for a serpent. After several different attempts of mushroom eating, she finally gets back to her regular size. In Chapter 6, she comes across the Duchess's house, where she welcomes herself in and sees a cook throwing dishes around and making soup with too much pepper. This causes everyone in the house to sneeze, except for the cook, who's smiling. The Duchess hands Alice her baby, and to her surprise, it turns into a pig. Chapter 7, A Mad Tea Party. The Cheshire Cat appears in a tree and directs Alice to the March Hare's house. He then disappears, but his grin stays behind. Alice remarks, "I've seen a cat without a grin, but never a grin without a cat." She ends up at a mad tea party with the Mad Hatter, where the other characters are telling her riddles and stories. The Mad Hatter explains that time is punishing them by standing still at 6 p.m., which is tea time. Alice becomes offended by all the stories and riddles and leaves, yelling out, "This is the stupidest tea party I've ever been to." After Alice leaves the tea party, she comes across 3 living, breathing playing cards. They're all standing around painting the roses red because the Queen of Hearts hates white roses. A procession of playing cards, kings and queens, and even the White Rabbit enter a garden. She's introduced to the king and the queen and immediately hears the queen's trademark phrase, "Off with his head." Alice is ordered to play a game of croquet with the queen and her subjects. The game immediately turns into chaos. Flamingos are used as mallets, hedgehogs as balls, and once again she meets the Cheshire Cat. The queen then debates with her husband on whether to chop off the cat's head, even though that's all that's left of him. The reason for this is he's the Duchess's cat. So who stole the tarts? Alice attends a trial where one of the playing cards is accused of stealing the Queen of Hearts' tarts. The jury is composed of several different types of animals, including the White Rabbit. The king is a judge, and during the trial, Alice realizes she's continuously growing taller. A dormouse scolds Alice by saying she has no right to grow so big and she's taking up all the air. Alice responds by saying, "Everyone grows and she can't help it." In the last chapter, Alice is called to the witness stand and accidentally knocks over the jury box. The king demands all the animals be placed back in the box before the trial continues. Alice begins to argue with the king and queen because they are angry she's growing so big. She eventually lets it all loose and the queen shouts, "Off with her head." But Alice isn't scared this time, and just as she begins to call them all a deck of playing cards, her sister wakes her up for tea. As Alice wakes up, she brushes a deck of playing cards off her face, which turns out just to be leaves. She then walks off and leaves her sister to go figure out what happened to herself. So thanks for watching my video. Please leave me some comments, rate the video, and subscribe to our channel. She looks back at the table and realizes there's a bottle on the, wait, okay. She looks back at the table and notices a bottle, okay. Okay. Here we go. The White Rabbit reappears in chapter 4 and is in search of looking.